Now in this video I want to talk about getting creative with your smartphone images. Now I always have my iPhone with me, of course, and it's, as the camera technology has gotten so much better with the smartphones, we're taking much better pictures that we can use in our workflow in Photoshop. Used to be I would just take reference photos and then use them just for that, but now I'm taking a lot more images with my phone and bringing them into my compositing workflow, and it's really a great thing because it's always the camera I have with me. So I want to show you what you can do with your images, even if it looks like it may be a pretty hopeless image. In fact, this is an image I shot from the plane. We don't always have the ability to grab our DSLR or any of our really high-end cameras when we're on the plane, of course, to be able to take a shot outside the window. Now, I was leaving Las Vegas, and this was just a few minutes after takeoff. We were flying over the desert, and I really liked the way the desert looked against the sky and everything like that. So I took my phone out, took a few shots, and was able to get some interesting stuff, and took it into Photoshop and thought, well, what if I added a few elements to it to make it a little bit more interesting? So right now, it's a pretty okay shot. It's very highly overexposed because it's a very bright day that day, of course. So I want to do a few things to fix that. So let's first adjust the levels on this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up levels on the image here, and really pump up the contrast by moving the midtone slider over a little bit, and maybe even darken the area a little bit more, pushing the shadows in, and then I'm just going to bring the highlight slider back just a little bit. And already that's bringing back a considerable amount of detail. Now I'm not concerning myself too much with the sky, at least not the higher level, because we're going to replace that a little bit later. But already I'm getting some pretty interesting detail on the ground area and such like that. So I'm going to click OK. But then I'm going to do another effect to this, and something that's really new in Photoshop, and it's using the dehaze filter. Now actually dehaze is only available in Camera Raw, and unfortunately you can apply Camera Raw as a filter here in Photoshop. So I'm going to go into the filter menu and go down here and choose Camera Raw filter, and it's going to go and open up Camera Raw. And we're going to go and click on the Effects tab here along the top here. And this is where you'll find the dehaze feature. Now if I grab the dehaze slider and push it to the right, you'll see the image becomes a little bit clearer and some of the colors are really punching out a little bit. And if I go the opposite way, it'll just add haze to it, which we don't want because it had enough haze in it to begin with. But I'm going to push this, and it's really going to help define the ground area a little bit better. And I think that looks pretty good. So around 35 I think looks good, so we'll go ahead and click OK. So in just a couple of features, we've applied levels and a little bit of dehaze, and we've got a much better image already than we had before. But what I want to do is bring this into a composite and add a better sky element and maybe a few other elements, maybe give it a little bit of a Hollywood look to it. So let's make a new document first. So I'm going to go ahead and make a 1300 pixel wide by 2000 pixel tall document, and let's go ahead and make the background, I'll just go ahead and make it white for now. Now, actually let's make that background black. I'm just going to press Command I there we go. So now I'm going to go and bring this image over. I'm just going to shift drag it over to this image here, and let's just position it. Let's scale it down a little bit and position it. Now I don't want to see any of those street elements or anything like that, so I'm just going to scale it a little bit more and position it right about there. There we go. So that looks pretty good. So now I want to bring another sky element into this, as I said before. So I actually have one already open here, and it's just got this cool sky field. I can see kind of the galaxy in here and this bright star right there. So this is going to work pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this over. And let's go ahead and scale this. Drag it up here and position it right about there. What I want to have is that bright star. I want to have that kind of in the center because that's going to become a different element as part of the design in just a moment. So position it right about here. And let's go ahead and minimize this image here. And let's add a layer mask to this star field layer. And I'm going to, again, use my gradient tool, foreground to transparent, just like normal. And then I'm going to go and get the linear gradient tool and just drag a gradient from the bottom here and fade out that horizon sky on this image and reveal the horizon of my iPhone shot. And that gives me an interesting blend of the atmosphere against the starry background there. So kind of cool. So that dot in the center, that is a bright star, but I want to actually make that look like it's a rocket leaving Earth as part of this shot, just to kind of give it an interesting perspective of, you've got this wide angle of looking at the Earth from at the ground level and in the space level, and there's a spaceship kind of lifting off in the middle of that. So I think I'm going to make a little bit more of a contrast boost on my ground element here. There we go. Now I'm also going to add a little bit more saturation to it. On that same smartphone shot, I'm going to boost the saturation up here. Let's do it at about 20 on the master saturation there. So that looks big difference there. So there we go. All right. So already this is pretty interesting. You know, from where we started with that really bright overexposed shot and bringing it to this point here is just a few steps, and we've already got a much better and more interesting photo than we had before. But what I want to do now is, again, like I said, I want to make this star look like it's a rocket that's just kind of recently left off the launching pad. So I'm going to make a new blank layer. Let's put it at the very top of the layer stack here. I'm going to get my brush tool, and let's go ahead and get a standard brush. In fact, I'm just getting one of these standard spatter brushes. It just comes with Photoshop there. And you can see right away, if I set the foreground color to white, the default behavior isn't anything exciting. So we need to go ahead and just change the behavior here. So I'm going to set my brush blend mode back to normal. And let's go ahead and change up some of the behavior here. So let's go into the brush tip shape and increase the spacing quite a bit. And we'll go to shape dynamics, and we'll have the size jitter going a little crazy, the angle jitter a little bit, and this is giving us, so it's giving us this kind of cool, kind of jet streamy kind of look about it. And maybe do a little bit of opacity jitter with the transfer. So I'm going to go ahead and set the transfer here for opacity jitter. You can either use the jitter slider, which I do have here, but I've also got pin pressure turned on as well, so it'll kind of have a variation to it. So on that layer, I'm simply going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and then let's just paint, starting with that bright spot, just kind of paint down. Make it a little bit more, there we go. So I'm just going to paint a couple of strokes using that brush behavior, and it gives me this kind of stream of smoke, like it just kind of recently lifted off from the atmosphere or something like that. But I'm going to add a little bit more dimension to it by adding a little bit of a bevel and emboss on that. Now notice if I put the default bevel and emboss on there, adds a little bit of dimension to that smoke element, which isn't bad. It's kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that and just go ahead and click OK and just add a little bit more smoke at the source here. And that looks pretty good. So that looks like it's, you know, recently just lifted off from there. In fact, if you wanted to add a little bit of a layer mask on there, just give it a tiny bit of a fade at the bottom here. So it has a little bit more atmosphere there. There we go. So there's my little smoke element. So I'm going to add another blank layer on above this, and let's add a flare to that bright spot so it looks like it's more of a man-made flare of a rocket rather than a star. So I've got a flare brush that I've got here, and then I'll go ahead and make this available as a download as part of the course. But on a new layer with white set as my foreground color, I'm just going to add a little dab of a little flare there, right there on that element there. And now it looks like it's like a rocket in the distance. You see the flare of the rocket, and it's kind of letting the jet stream kind of flow there. So that's kind of cool. So now let's add a few more elements just to kind of help finish us off. So I'm going to add a couple of gradients. Let's add another blank layer here. And I'm going to go ahead and just grab my eyedropper tool and sample the dark of the space field up here. And let's just add a gradient at the top, coming in from the top here. Not coming in from the bottom, but coming in from the top. And then I'll change that blend mode to multiply, and let's just bring the opacity back a little bit. So it gives me a much more darker area of the top there. And down here at the bottom, on that same layer, I'm going to select, or no, let's put it on another layer. Let's try and keep all the effects on their own layer as much as possible. But on that blank layer, I'm going to now sample the ground color and then just give it a gradient from the bottom going up here. And then let's just change this to something like overlay. Maybe a little too much. Let's maybe see what multiply does. Yeah, maybe soft light. Yeah, I'll go ahead and use soft light there. There we go. So that's giving me a little bit more variation of color. It's giving me a little bit almost like a vignette effect on there. And then all we need to do now is just add some text, you know. So let's add some text up here. Let's go above and beyond. Some dramatic text element here. Let's actually scale this up. And I'm going to go ahead and change the font there. Let's go ahead and make this, one of my favorite fonts right now is this Futura. And we'll go ahead and put that down so they're all on their own line there. So there we go. So I'll go ahead and fill that text with white, and let's just go ahead and center this. Oh, don't need that space there. There we go. Let's have that centered right about there. And then I'll just duplicate that layer, just Option drag down and add Shift so it stays aligned. And then we'll just, well, maybe this is a fictional movie called Leaving Earth. And let's make that a little bit bigger. Center it right down there. And there we have that. Now, one final element you can add here, and I thought this was kind of interesting to do. I'm going to make another layer, and I'm going to go ahead and get, let's get the brush tool again. And let's select a standard soft, or no, I'm sorry, just a regular round brush here. And let's open up the brush options. I'm just clicking on that little icon there. Now, I want to have the pen pressure on for size right here, this control setting for the size. But I want to make the brush tip very, very small. In fact, we're going to go more like maybe 3 pixels, something like that. That looks pretty good. So like a 3 pixel blur size on that. So now I'm going to go ahead and get the pen tool here and just draw a slightly curved line right up here in this area of the stars here. And this is going to be kind of like a meteorite kind of flying into the atmosphere. It's just going to be a streak of light that's going to be going across there. So on a new blank layer, on that new blank layer here, let's go ahead and go to the Paths panel here. And we created the brush and we set the size and everything like that. We have pen pressure turned on. That is critical even if you're not using a pressure sensitive tablet. So make sure that that pen pressure setting is on, because what I'm going to do here is go to the flyout menu of the Paths panel and choose Stroke Path. Now I want to set it to the brush, but I also want to simulate pressure. That's why you're going to have that pressure sensitivity on, because we're going to simulate pressure here and click OK. And if I click and deactivate the path there, you can see my little streak right up there among that text there. It looks like a kind of a meteorite or something flying into the atmosphere. It adds a little mystery to it. Now, because this area is a little bit bright down here, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of a drop shadow to my text. Not quite that big and not quite that far away from it, but just enough to give it a little bit of separation to that background element there. And that little streak of light, I'm going to lower the opacity so it falls back into the atmosphere a little bit more. But there is pretty much it. Now, I obviously would probably play around with the text a little bit more here, but we've taken a simple, seemingly bad shot with our smartphone from the plane and was able to create something rather interesting out of it with just another simple stock image and a few little brush effects here inside Photoshop. So the point here is, when you're looking through your phone, looking at those images that you took, think about, what can I take in Photoshop and make this a little bit more interesting with some special effects, some layer effects. You just never know until you go in there and play with it. But I hope you have fun with it.